The day my vision was unexpectedly restored happened to be my birthday. I planned to tell him the good news at the birthday party Killian had prepared for me, but I never expected to first discover the surprise he had prepared for me at the party, covered with a layer of white veil. Killian carefully held my hand and led me to the banquet hall on the second floor, whispering intimately in my ear, "Darling, I know you love flowers. So I specially arranged for a batch of roses to be airlifted from Kenya to build you a flower bridge. I also invited your favorite band to perform live for you. Now, CityHS all business elites and renowned media are here to celebrate your birthday. Do you like it?" As he spoke, he lowered his head and kissed my forehead. "Don't worry, I promised you that even if you never regain your sight, I will still give you everything you deserve." But he didn't know that I had regained my sight and could clearly see everything at the scene, just waiting to give him a surprise. "Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day." Now the story begins. The banquet hall was dimly lit with only a few faint lights, and remnants of posters and banners left by the previous guests lay on the floor. The faint, elusive floral scent came from a dust-covered flameless fragrance diffuser in the distance. Several guests, actually servers in disguise, raised champagne glasses to Killian and exchanged polite greetings. "Mrs. Lucian, you look even more beautiful. Happy birthday, and may you stay forever young." Mr. Killian and Mrs. Lucian standing together are truly the envy of everyone, but I was completely stiff, unable to even feign a smile in response. Noticing something was off with me, Killian waved the actors away and helped me sit down. "What's wrong, honey? Are you too tired? Why don't you sit here and listen to the performance to rest?" Surround sound speakers played cheerful music. This was what he called the live orchestra performance. Killian only sat with me for a while before picking up his phone, making an excuse, and getting up to leave, and I, clenching my fingertips, silently followed his retreating figure to the banquet hall on the first floor. There, I actually saw the scene he had just described, under the opulent crystal chandelier. Elegantly dressed guests mingled, with flower walls, a live orchestra, and busy waitstaff attending to the real attendees. This is a child's first birthday celebration. Killian, wearing a mask, strode to the center of the banquet where a woman was holding a child. He affectionately wrapped his arm around her shoulder, and together they smiled and played with the baby in her arms. This scene looked just like a family of three. Then the woman turned around, and the moment I saw her face, my mind went blank for a moment. How could it be her? My legs went weak, and I pressed myself tightly against the massive pillar, a flood of suspicions surging in my heart. Yet I could only keep telling myself that this couldn't be true, until Killian walked to the corner and started chatting with his closest brothers. "Oh dear Mr. Killian, having to wear a mask even at your own child's first birthday party, doesn't that feel suffocating?" "Yes, Killian, Helen has been blind for 3 years. And your child with Janet is already 1 year old. How much longer do you plan to keep this a secret? You just don't get it, do you?" Back then, Killian insisted on marrying Helen precisely because he had his eyes on the Helen-S backing from the Morton family. He threw her such a grand, century-defining wedding to make sure everyone in City H knew he was tied to Helen. And now look, he has to sneak around just to attend a first birthday party. The group of people all sighed almost inaudibly. "You're right about that. If Killian goes public with the child, it would mean cutting ties with the Morton family, and the company's image would take a hit. Truly, you can't have both career and love." "Hey, I actually have a way." One of them lowered his voice, his eyes taking on a chilling glint. "Anyway, Helen is blind now. If something were to happen to her, it would be perfectly understandable for Killian to remarry." The others' eyes immediately lit up, and they excitedly chimed in. "That's right. Anyway, the Morton family has all moved abroad. As long as we do it discreetly, and something happens to Helen, all of you, shut up." Killian, his fists clenched until they turned white, his cold eyes sweeping over these brothers, chilling the surrounding atmosphere by what felt like 2 degrees. "I married Helen because I truly love her. As long as I'm here, I won't allow her to suffer any more accidents." His gaze drifted into the distance, his expression tinged with a touch of loneliness. "Back when Helen had the accident, I truly ached for her, but I also genuinely couldn't bring myself to touch her again. During the most agonizing period, Janet was by my side, rekindling the feeling of love in me. Now our child is already 1 year old, and I must protect them both, mother and child. So, I want my career, I want Janet, and Helen, I want her too." Upon hearing this, the group of brothers exchanged glances, their expressions filled with sighs. I froze in place. The blood in my entire body had reversed, flowing from my head to my feet. So, Killian really did have another woman behind my back, and even had a child with her. Tears suddenly rolled from my eyes, my hands trembling uncontrollably. What's even more ridiculous is that he actually said he loved me. Perhaps he only loved me once upon a time. Killian grew up together since childhood, from as far back as I can remember. He was always by my side like a big brother, inseparable. In my childhood, he explored the rock gardens with me. In my adolescence, he shooed away the boys who tried to flirt with me. When I went abroad for a dance competition, he braved the snow and traveled 197 miles just to cheer me on. The only time things went off track was 3 years ago. To help the new secretary Janet get familiar with her work, he sent me home alone late at night with the driver. At that time, I didn't know the driver was Janet's brother, nor did I know he would develop malicious intentions toward me midway. In a frantic escape, I was cornered by the driver into an unfinished building and had to jump from the rooftop. Afterward, although I survived, I broke 2 ribs, suffered a miscarriage, and lost my eyesight due to optic nerve damage. Everyone said the once glamorous Morton family's eldest daughter had become disabled overnight, but Killian still stayed by my side, unwavering. He disregarded Janet's tearful pleas and personally sent the driver to prison. He then held an extraordinarily grand century wedding to marry me, showing his stance to all the wealthy families in City H. But now, it was also him who said to his brothers, Helen may not have been truly violated, but the thought of her being touched with her clothes torn makes me feel a bit disgusted. It's actually good that she's blind, at least it allows me to hide the truth from her and create such a beautiful dream for her. It felt as if my heart had been torn open, a gaping hole through which the wind howled and rushed in. Looking at that all too familiar face not far away, for the first time, I felt that he was truly disgusting. My phone suddenly vibrated in my pocket. I hurriedly left and answered the phone in the restroom. My brother's voice on the other end was excited. Helen, I've already discussed with the doctor. Since you don't want to go abroad, we'll bring him back to the country to help treat you. The doctor is an internationally renowned ophthalmology expert, so he should have a great chance of curing your eyes. No need, brother. I gave a bitter smile and said softly, thank you for all your hard work over these 3 years, helping me search everywhere for renowned doctors. I've decided that once I finish handling matters here in the country, I'll go to Australia to reunite with you and our parents. What's wrong, Helen? You were always unwilling to leave City H before because of Killian. Has something happened? Ever since the Morton family's business gradually shifted overseas, our parents and brother have basically settled in Australia. Only I stayed in Killian's City H for him. During the 3 years of my blindness, they had been searching for doctors worldwide to help me, but when they first contacted the doctor, Killian was unwilling to let me go for treatment. His reason was that he didn't feel comfortable letting me be too far away from him, insisting that I wait until he finished handling company matters before accompanying me to Australia for treatment. Later, it just kept getting delayed. Now I understand, he was never too busy, he just didn't want me to get my eyesight back and discover his relationship with Janet. Brother, I'm fine, actually, my eyesight has recovered, it just recovered today. You and Mom and Dad don't have to worry about me anymore. Oh, and brother, please transfer 100 million to my account. I need to take care of some personal matters before I leave. After hanging up the phone, I stared at the text message confirming the transfer of 100 million and smirked. Since Killian couldn't choose between the company and Janet, then let me give him a surprise before I leave, helping him make the choice, veiled in white gauze. I returned to the second-floor banquet hall with my blind cane, only to find Killian raging at the caregivers and waitstaff, desperately searching for me. He quickly stepped forward and held me tightly in his arms, his voice filled with panic. Honey, where did you go? I was so afraid something might happen to you again. I just went to the restroom. Even so, you should have the nurse accompany you. Silly, your eyesight isn't good, you can't go anywhere alone from now on. I gently shook my head and said calmly, Killian, I'm tired. He immediately rubbed my hair affectionately, bent down, and scooped me up in his arms. All right, let's go home. Killian didn't take me back to our home, but to the luxurious mansion he had spent a fortune building for me 3 years ago. Every piece of furniture inside was designed with rounded edges, wrapped in soft gauze, equipped with a basic medical system and experienced caregivers, every detail accommodating my blindness. I once thought he did all these things out of love for me, but in reality, he was just banishing me here, so I wouldn't interfere with him spending time with his real family. Honey, go back and rest well. I'll come to keep you company once the project is finished. After dropping me off at the villa entrance and saying these words, he got into the car and drove away. The caregiver helped me back to my room, and I paused midway. A vase suddenly fell from a height, shattering just 3 centimeters away from my feet. Immediately after, I smelled something burning, and the maid came running downstairs shouting, "It's bad, there's a fire." Killian quickly turned back upon receiving the news, accompanied by Janet. Seeing that I was still standing safely in front of her, Janet showed a flicker of surprise on her face. Killian demanded coldly from the villa's butler, How could a fire break out for no reason? Was there any corner cutting when this villa was built? Janet quickly interrupted. Enough, Killian. This isn't the time to assign blame. Since the villa is already burned down, let's bring Helen back to live with us. Killian's face was half-lit, half-shadowed by the firelight. It wasn't until I cleared my throat lightly that he frowned and explained to me with an unnatural expression. Helen, come live with me at home, Janet's rent expired a while ago. So she's been staying at the villa recently. It works out well, she can help take care of you too. I sneered and asked deliberately, Janet moved in alone. Killian's face darkened a few shades. He gave Janet's hand a reassuring squeeze before saying to me, she also has a 1-year-old nephew who will be staying for a while. But don't worry, they'll leave as soon as they find a place. But I knew that the person he meant to send away after finding a place was actually me, in the car. Killian, knowing I was blind, openly texted Janet on his phone. Honey, you and the baby will have to put up with this for a while. I'll arrange a new place for Helen as soon as possible. Janet replied quickly, since I'm putting up with it, will there be any compensation? Killian chuckled softly and typed quickly, is compensating you in bed enough? Janet turned from the passenger seat, her face flushed with both embarrassment and annoyance, raising her hand to punch Killian's chest. But he seized her wrist, planting a kiss on her fingertips, and silently mouthed the words, I love you, wife. He didn't know that I could see everything clearly. Back at the villa, Killian supported me carefully with one hand, while his other hand remained tightly interlocked with Janet's. The nanny came up from afar and said to Janet, Madam, you're finally back. The baby just woke up and started crying again when they didn't see you. Killian frowned and interrupted her. Who are you calling madam? Only then did the nanny notice that I had also arrived. She immediately slapped her forehead and corrected herself, saying to me, I'm sorry, you see how scatterbrained I am. I was urgently looking for Janet. But when I saw you, I accidentally called her Janet. Killian gave her a look. You may go now. If you make such a basic mistake again, don't expect any bonus for the rest of the year, then. He personally helped me sit down on the sofa. Helen, sit here and rest for a while. I'll go check how your room is coming along. But he did not turn to go upstairs. Instead, he exchanged a smile with Janet, gently wrapped his arm around her waist, and walked with her into the nursery. I looked around this long unvisited house and realized that all the photos of Killian and me traveling together since childhood, the postcards we exchanged, the gifts, and the carefully arranged decorations had all been replaced with his wedding photos with Janet and pictures of their child. Placed in the most prominent spot was a family portrait of him, Janet, and their child together. They looked so happy in the photo, like the most ordinary family of 3. I suppressed the rising bitterness in my nasal passages and used the miniature camera hidden in my brooch to capture all this evidence one by one. After what felt like an eternity, fireworks began to go off outside the courtyard. Killian and Janet finally emerged from the nursery. Ah, these are the birthday fireworks for Ollie. Janet snuggled in Killian's arms and spoke excitedly, even taking the initiative to invite me as they passed by. Helen, let's go watch the fireworks together too. But she suddenly realized something and covered her mouth in self-reproach. Oh dear, I forgot that Helen can't see anything now. Killian was amused by her guilty expression and lovingly tapped the tip of her nose. I'm fine, I mouthed to her. Then she remembered to ask me, Helen, should I help you back to your room to rest? I shook my head, propped myself up with my white cane, and stood. You all go ahead with your business. I can go upstairs by myself. Killian, with Janet tightly clinging to his arm, showed no intention of helping me, only calling out from behind, I've prepared milk in your room. Don't forget to drink it. Standing before the huge floor-to-ceiling window in the room, I could clearly see bursts of fireworks exploding in the sky, weaving into the shape of a simple sketch of a family of 3. Then the image transformed into a line of text, which read, Happy Ollie's first birthday. May your life be free from worries. It was so dazzlingly brilliant, the sound deafening. It's so much like the year Killian proposed to me. He knelt under the sky full of fireworks. And after I nodded, his hands trembled slightly as he put the ring on my finger. Then he held me tightly in his arms, his voice filled with excitement and tenderness, saying, I've decided, Helen, our child will be named Ollie. Why? Because I want to be with you, and with our baby, for a long, long time. Forever together. But our child had already died 3 years ago, and his and Janet's child is also named Ollie. The fireworks lasted a full hour before ending. And the glass of milk by my hand that Killian had spiked had long gone cold. I got up and poured all the milk down the bathroom drain. Then, at the doorway, I overheard a deliberately hushed conversation in the hallway. Honey, be careful, Helen is still here. What if she hears or sees something? Killian breathed heavily, his voice tinged with hoarseness. Don't worry, honey, She can't see anything, and I gave her sleeping pills. We have the whole night to make it up to you properly." The sound of fabric rustling was heard, but Janet stopped him again. "I never agreed to this kind of compensation. Honey, my brother wants to start a business recently. Could you help him with some investment?" Killian clicked his tongue lightly. "Your brother, you're still in touch with him. 3 years ago, he did those despicable things that harmed Helen. I was willing to let him off the hook for your sake. And that's not enough. Now he's sent you to ask me for money." My heart gave a sudden, violent tremor. Janet's brother, that driver from back then, the memories of that night 3 years ago, deliberately forgotten, surged back into my mind. He was the one who pushed me to the brink, killed my child, and almost ruined my entire life. "Killian, didn't you repeatedly promise me that you would bring him to justice? He lied to me. How could he lie to me about this?" My hands trembled uncontrollably and violently. The glass in my hand suddenly fell onto the plush carpet, making a soft, muffled sound. The conversation outside the door abruptly stopped, and Killian's voice, tinged with a chill, came through. "Helen." He pushed the door open and entered directly. Seeing that I was already lying quietly in bed, fast asleep, and the glass of milk on the table had been drunk clean, Killian finally breathed a sigh of relief. "I must have misheard it just now," Janet said in a pitiful tone. "Honey, I was really scared just now. Feel my heart, it's beating so fast." Killian sighed almost inaudibly and said helplessly, "Later, have your brother write a project proposal. I'll evaluate whether his business is worth investing in." "Killian, you agreed," Janet said excitedly. Killian chuckled. "Why aren't you scared now?" Janet held his face and gave him a firm kiss. "Scared? Of course I am. How about you help boost my courage, hubby, tonight? Why don't you make it up to me in Helen's room, Her remaining words were swallowed by Killian's domineering kiss. I opened my eyes, watching them as if I were invisible, passionately entwined on the soft carpet. My fingers dug tightly into the sheets as I almost masochistically watched it all unfold. Finally, enduring the waves of heart-wrenching pain, I aimed the miniature camera at the two entangled figures. Early the next morning, I was awakened by a stifling heat. Opening my eyes, I saw that it was Janet's brother Paul, who was pressing his whole body on top of me, frantically unbuttoning my pajamas. "Ah!" I screamed and pushed him away, my voice trembling uncontrollably. "Get away from me. Don't touch me." Paul was stunned for a moment. "You can see who I am. That can't be right. Janet said you were already blind." Then, as if he thought of something, his smile turned even more lewd. "I get it. You must still be thinking about that night 3 years ago. So the moment I touched you, you recognized it was me. Right, since there's no one in the villa right now, let's make up for the regret from back then and have a good time." He sneered and lunged at me again. I gasped for breath, picked up my cane, and struck him hard on the head. Taking advantage of his moment of pain, I dashed downstairs, but in my panic, I missed a step and tumbled down the stairs. Paul caught up with me again, grabbing my wrist and pinning me tightly to the ground. I grabbed a fruit knife and held it to my chest. "Don't touch me." But his movements were rough, his expression already tinged with anger, as he raised his hand high at me. "You little bitch, I'm going to touch you today no matter what." I closed my eyes tightly and, without a second thought, stabbed the knife hard into his arm. With a cry of pain, blood instantly splattered onto my face. Paul clutched his arm in agony and collapsed off of me. I immediately forced myself up from the ground, pointing the bleeding tip of my knife at Paul on the floor. Just then, Killian and Janet finally returned. Seeing the scene before her, Janet shrieked and rushed forward, pushing me away with all her might. "Brother, what happened to you?" I was thrown to the ground by the immense force, the back of my head slamming hard against the edge of the coffee table. Warm blood trickled down my neck, the excruciating pain making my entire brain buzz. Before completely losing consciousness, I saw with my own eyes Killian rush forward and hold Janet in his arms, whispering comforting words to her repeatedly, his expression so tense. When I opened my eyes again, I was already lying in a hospital room. Killian was sitting by my bedside, and as soon as he saw I was awake, he immediately asked with concern, "Honey, you're awake. How are you feeling? Is there anywhere you still feel unwell?" I tried to prop myself up with my arm, but immediately a sharp pain shot through my forearm, making me frown in discomfort. "What happened to my arm?" Killian immediately stopped my movement and explained, "I was in such a hurry when I brought you here that I accidentally scratched your arm, but it's already bandaged. Don't be scared, honey, it's just a small wound." But Killian didn't know that I had regained my vision and could see the evasiveness in his eyes as he said these words. I could also see that the so-called small wound had already started bleeding, staining the bandage red. However, that wasn't my biggest concern. I asked him in a low voice, "Didn't you tell me you personally sent Paul to prison? Why is he at home? And he even dared to attack me so boldly." Killian was taken aback. then said, Paul he behaved well in prison. So he was released early. But honey, don't worry, this is the first and last time. I'll definitely tighten security and make sure he never appears in front of you again. As he spoke, his phone suddenly buzzed. Whatever message came through, Killian glanced at it and smiled faintly, then immediately stood up and said to me, Honey, there's an urgent matter at the company. I need to go handle it. If you need anything, just let the nurse know. As he turned away, I saw it clearly, the name Janet appearing in that chat window. I endured the pain in the back of my head and forearm, propping myself up to get out of bed. On the table, I found my medical record sheet, which the nurse had forgotten to take away. On it, it was clearly written that 2 hours ago, I had undergone a full-thickness skin graft harvesting procedure from my forearm. Skin harvesting. Harvesting what skin? My forearm skin. And who was it for? Suddenly, a possibility dawned on me. My eyes widened in disbelief, and I grabbed my phone, rushing straight to the surveillance room. There was only an old man guarding the surveillance room, so I directly handed him a bank card. There's 5 million in this card. Leave and let me check something, and all this money is yours. The old man left overjoyed with the card, and I sat in front of the computer, scrolling through the surveillance footage. Then, I saw the conversation between Killian and Janet while I was unconscious. In the video, Janet sobbed and threw herself into Killian's arms, pointing at me on the hospital bed and accusing him. Ms. Helen, how could she do this? Just because my brother once did something bad to her, now she wants to stab him with a knife. Is there no justice or law left in this world? Killian's face looked rather unpleasant. He turned Janet's shoulders and asked with a furrowed brow, Helen has always been kind to others, and now that she's blind, how could she suddenly attack your brother? There must be more to this story. Also, I did say I could take a look at your brother's project proposal, but I never said he could bring it directly to my home to see me. Janet stared at her in a daze, her face full of shock and displeasure. So, now you're blaming my brother and me for all this, aren't you? But the servants at home said they saw it with their own eyes. That Ms. Helen went crazy and stabbed him with a knife as soon as she recognized my brother's voice. You don't believe any of that, do you? Killian sighed softly. Baby, I didn't mean it that way. You clearly did. Janet pushed his hand away abruptly, tears welling in her eyes as she cried out to him. Yes, I almost forgot. Ms. Helen is your lawfully wedded wife, so it's only natural for you to side with her. I'll take the child and my brother and leave City H right now. And never disturb your happiness again. She turned to leave as soon as she finished speaking, but Killian grabbed her from behind and held her tightly. I believe you, alright, I believe you. From an angle unseen by anyone, Janet curled the corner of her lips slightly, still speaking in a tone of complaint. In that case, Ms. Helen intentionally caused harm. Shouldn't she offer some compensation? The cut on my brother's arm is too deep. The doctor says it will leave a scar, so, if you have Ms. Helen undergo a skin graft for my brother, I'll believe you're truly fair and just. Hearing this, Killian subconsciously glanced at me lying unconscious on the hospital bed, but he didn't hesitate for long before replying hoarsely to Janet. Alright, whatever you say. Seeing this, I understood perfectly well how the wound on my arm had come to be. Trembling, I turned off the monitor, even though I had long seen through Killian's true nature. At this moment, my heart still ached uncontrollably. This is the husband I carefully chose and loved for so many years. It turns out he would send someone to cut off my skin and flesh while I was unconscious, to use for skin grafts for my enemy. Good, just great. I forced down the bitterness in my heart and quickly copied and saved this surveillance footage. It's okay, it won't be long before all of this is made public. I will personally, bit by bit, tear off the hypocritical masks of him and Janet. On the way back to the ward, I continued to tap my white cane, pretending to be blind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following me. Before I could turn around to look, a dull pain suddenly struck the back of my neck, and then everything went black as I collapsed. I was jolted awake by a bucket of ice water. When I opened my eyes, I found my hands and feet tightly bound, and the two people who had kidnapped me were actually Janet and Paul. Bro, why do I keep feeling like she can see us? Has she regained her sight? Janet frowned and leaned closer to me, waving her hand in front of my eyes, but I just stared blankly without even blinking. At that moment, Paul suddenly walked toward me holding a knife, a playful smile on his lips. How can you tell if she's really blind like this? Let me do it. Then, he actually swung the knife and thrust it toward my eyes, just as the tip of the blade was less than a centimeter from my eye. Janet quickly spoke up to stop him. Brother, be careful, aren't we just here to teach her a lesson today? Even though she's blind, there's no need to actually hurt her eyes. If Killian finds out and holds us accountable, it won't be good. Paul snorted coldly and threw the knife away. Your brother isn't that stupid. I was just testing her earlier, but it seems she really is blind. She wasn't even scared when the knife was about to stab her eyes. Ha ha ha. I lay on the ground, my chest heaving violently, and shouted at the two of them, "Janet, Paul, you actually kidnapped me." Janet was somewhat surprised. She walked step by step toward me and ground her high heel hard into my injured forearm. "You recognized our voices so quickly. But the show I prepared hasn't even started yet." Paul grabbed my arm and dragged me to a large water vat, then kicked me hard behind the knee. Ah! I knelt on the muddy ground, my knees hitting the earth with a heavy thud, the pain instantly bringing cold sweat to my brow. Immediately after, my hair was yanked violently, and I was dragged and forced headfirst into a water vat. The water in the vat must have had something added to it. My eyes were instantly stung to tears, and as I choked on several mouthfuls, my throat swelled with pain. They watched me struggle fiercely, only pulling me up by the hair when I was on the verge of drowning. And after barely 2 seconds, shoved me back in again. I don't know how many times this was repeated, but they finally stopped when they got tired. I was thrown heavily to the ground, completely exhausted, my eyes swollen, and every breath I took was accompanied by a heart-wrenching pain in my throat. But luckily, I managed to find the phone I had dropped earlier, and I hid it behind me to call my emergency contact. "You bitch, still trying to play tricks." Paul heard the sound, snatched the phone from behind me, and was about to raise it to smash it when Janet walked over. She took the phone, looked at the number I was dialing for Killian, and curled her lips into a mocking smile. "Helen, guess if I contact Killian now, whose call will he answer first?" As she spoke, she leisurely took out her phone and dialed. In just 2 seconds, my side showed the call was rejected. Janet's phone transmitted Killian's voice. "Baby, I was just in a meeting, what's wrong?" Janet raised an eyebrow and glanced at me, then pouted and let out an exaggerated sob. "Honey, my car suddenly got a flat tire while I was driving. It's so scary. Where are you? Don't panic, I'll come find you right away." On the other end of the phone, the rustling sound of someone getting up immediately followed. Janet curled the corners of her lips and hung up. "Let's go, bro, it's time for us to set up the accident scene." Before leaving, Paul grinned viciously and pinched my thigh hard. "Little beauty, next time I get the chance, I'll play with you properly." I watched their departing figures with resentment, yet I no longer had the strength to even stand up. Outside, a light rain began to patter down. I could only rub the rope against a sharp edge bit by bit until it frayed, then hobbled my way back to the villa. Throughout this entire ordeal, Killian didn't return a single call to me. Under the warm yellow light inside the villa, Janet had changed into clean clothes and was snuggling coquettishly in Killian's arms. Seeing me return, she feigned shock and walked up to me. "Oh my God, what happened? How did you end up like this?" As she spoke, she grabbed my arm to check my wounds, but the next second, I grabbed her wrist and slapped her hard across the face. Slap. Janet and Killian were both stunned. I spoke coldly. "What are you pretending? Wasn't it you who teamed up with Paul to kidnap me?" Janet covered the reddened side of her cheek where I had hit her, and with teary eyes, threw herself into Killian's arms. "I can't understand Helen, what you're saying." Killian also frowned deeply, his voice carrying a chill. "Helen, what madness are you spouting? Janet had a flat tire and was stuck on the highway with her brother all day. How could she possibly have kidnapped you?" His sharp eyes fixed on me as if staring at a heinous criminal. "It reminds me of what Janet said to me before she left this afternoon. You'd better keep what happened today to yourself. After all, you're just a blind person with no evidence to prove we kidnapped you. If this blows up, it'll only make Killian think you're a raving lunatic." Now, Janet is sobbing in Killian's arms, saying, Helen claims she was kidnapped, but she can't even see who kidnapped her. How dare she falsely accuse me and my brother like this?" I sneered. "What if I said I have evidence? Ever since my birthday, I've been carrying a voice recorder with me, keeping it on auto record. Naturally, this recorder captured everything that happened this afternoon, but I never expected that before I could even present the evidence, Killian would raise his hand and shove me, making me stumble." He looked at me coldly. "Earlier Janet told me that your psychiatrist said you were ill, and I didn't believe it. But these past 2 days you've been stabbing people and making false accusations. Helen, what exactly are you trying to do, Mr. Killian? Please don't blame Helen anymore," Janet said with a frown. "She has a psychological knot due to her eye disease. The only thing we can do now is take her to see a doctor." My nails dug deeply into my palms as I said in a low voice, "What do you mean?" Killian glanced at me, then sighed softly and said to Janet, "Let's wait a bit longer. I'm afraid those people might treat Helen badly." Janet immediately responded, "Mr. Killian, don't worry, I've already communicated with the people at the mental hospital in advance. They will try to treat Helen in a gentle way." Mental hospital. Killian actually discussed with Janet behind my back about sending me to a mental hospital. Seeing Killian remain silent with a grim expression, Janet bit her lip, looking aggrieved. Last time she stabbed my brother. This time I'm being framed. Next time, she might even target the child. Are you just going to stand by and watch her hurt the baby? Killian's expression softened. After a brief silence, he looked at me and said in a low voice, "Honey, pack your things. You're sick and need to go to the hospital for treatment." I opened my mouth in disbelief, my voice trembling. Just because of Janet's words, you believe I have a mental problem and want to send me to a mental hospital? Killian remained silent, but I knew that was his answer, because Janet had arranged things in advance. The people at the mental hospital locked me in the storage room closest to the restroom. They force me to take large doses of therapeutic medication every day. If I refuse, what awaits me is the electric shock in the treatment room. I finally realized that Janet doesn't just want to torment me, she wants my life. That day, after being forced to take the medication again, I secretly made myself vomit it up while they weren't around. Just as I finished disposing of the vomited pills, a nurse came in to inform me that Killian had come to visit. Seeing that I had only been locked up for 3 days and was already disheveled and dispirited like this, Killian flashed a look of shock in his eyes, but perhaps Janet had said something to him in advance. As he didn't react more strongly, he simply pushed the lunchbox in front of me. "You've had a hard time these days. I brought you a meal made by the housekeeper. Have a few bites first." Watching me wolf down the 4 dishes and 1 soup he brought, Killian showed a pained expression on his face. He pushed a document in front of me. "Honey, I know you've been wronged, so I plan to transfer a few properties in the southern suburbs to your name. Just sign here, cooperate with the treatment. And once you're better, I'll take you home, okay?" As he spoke, he thoughtfully flipped the contract to the last page, placed the pen in my hand, and guided it to the signature area. "Honey, just sign right here." He took advantage of me being blind, thinking I couldn't see those bold words on the contract, divorce agreement. So, he's already this eager to be with Janet, but it's just as well. Before leaving, completely severing the last remaining tie with Killian is also my wish. I quickly signed my name but secretly hid the pen in my sleeve. "Killian, before leaving, I asked him softly, even though you see me suffering like this now, you would still keep me locked up here for Janet's sake, wouldn't you?" "Don't talk nonsense." Killian ruffled my hair, brushing me off just like every time before, saying, "There's still some company business to attend to. Work hard on your treatment, dear. I'll try to find time to visit you more often in the future." A faint smile touched my lips as I nodded calmly and solemnly. "All right, Killian, goodbye." There would be no future. Today was the last time I would ever see him. That night, the nurse pushed open the door to the storage room where I was, holding a tray of medicine, and roughly shook me under the blanket. "Hey, wake up and take your medicine." She frowned and pulled the blanket aside, only to find a doll lying inside. At that moment, I appeared behind her, covering her mouth and pressing the tip of a pen I'd taken from Killian against her carotid artery. "Don't move, put down the plate and raise your hands." The nurse, who was usually the harshest with me, was trembling with fear at this moment. She immediately raised her hands as I instructed, only to be knocked unconscious by a swift chop to the neck the next second. I changed into the nurse's uniform as quickly as possible and found the warehouse key on her. Then, keeping my head down to avoid the surveillance cameras, I successfully retrieved my phone and personal belongings and escaped the mental hospital. In the airport lounge, I edited and saved the evidence I had into 2 copies. One was handed over to the police, containing evidence of Killian collaborating with Janet to illegally harvest my skin, commit adultery during marriage, as well as Janet and Paul kidnapping and abusing me. The other copy was given to major media outlets in City H. I paid the entire 100 million yuan my brother transferred to me as promotion fees to the news media. I want to make Killian and Janet's filthy scenes appear on the public square screen in City H for everyone to see. I want them to be utterly disgraced. After finishing this, I closed my laptop and walked toward the boarding gate without looking back. The plane cut through the sky, carrying me away from this land filled with lies and betrayal, just out of the mental hospital. Killian saw Janet waiting for him outside the hospital. "So, honey, did she agree to sign?" Janet trotted up to him and asked eagerly. Killian nodded and handed over the signed divorce agreement, but for some reason, he felt an odd sensation in his heart, especially before leaving. Helen's smile toward him made him feel a heavy weight in his chest. Everything he had done these days seemed really unfair to Helen. Moreover, Helen's life in the mental hospital wasn't as good as Janet had described. He had seen it all. In just 3 days, Helen had lost a lot of weight, her naturally rosy and fair skin had turned sallow, and her hair, which she used to keep clean and smooth even when blind, had become a mess. Even the meals he brought her, no matter how delicious, she wouldn't finish so quickly and eagerly. It was as if he had been starving for so long that he couldn't hold on any longer. Janet was looking over the signatures on the agreement. completely unaware that Killian's thoughts had drifted far away. Great, with this, you can divorce Helen and be with me, and our baby can have a proper status. These words went unanswered by Killian for a long time. Janet tugged at his sleeve. Honey, what are you thinking about? Killian finally came to his senses, but still frowned. I think it's better to bring Helen out of the mental hospital, not to our home, but directly to another villa, so she won't have the chance to harm the children. Janet said with a dissatisfied expression. But Ms. Helen is sick. When someone is ill, they need to stay and receive treatment. Your indecisiveness is only harming her, but she isn't doing well in there. It seems like she's been wronged in some way. Stop talking. Janet raised her hand to stop him, then turned her head away directly. I understand, even though you and Ms. Helen have already signed the divorce papers, she's still the childhood sweetheart you grew up with, in your heart. She will always be the most special one. I was wrong. I shouldn't have tried to help her find a hospital for treatment, and I shouldn't have gotten in the way between the two of you. Go pick her up. No matter what, I won't say another word. By the end, her voice carried a hint of choked sobs. Killian quickly wrapped his arm around her shoulders and sighed helplessly. Why are you overthinking again? I've told you all these years you've stayed by my side without recognition. Even bore me a child. It's me who's wronged you, and the one I love now is you. What I feel for Helen is merely responsibility. Since you don't want me to pick her up from the hospital, I won't do it then. Alright, really. Janet had tears in her eyes, but the corners of her lips were already curling up slightly. She turned and took Killian's hand. If you want me to trust you, come with me to one place. Killian never expected that Janet would bring him directly to the Civil Affairs Bureau. She quickly helped Killian and Helen process their divorce with the divorce agreement, then took out her own documents and pulled Killian toward the marriage registration window. Killian paused for a moment. Are we really in such a hurry? One person, getting divorced on the same day, and marrying someone else on the very same day. He always felt it was somewhat absurd. Janet frowned slightly. How had she never noticed before that Killian had such a hesitant side to him, and all because of Helen? After all, that blind woman had moved out so many years ago. She was the one who had been by Killian's side all this time. Now that she could finally be with Killian openly, what on earth was Killian still hesitating about? She wouldn't allow it. Killian, even if you won't think of me, you have to think of Ollie. He's already a year old and still hasn't been registered. Do you want him to live in hiding for the rest of his life? You're already divorced from Helen. The person who will walk with you through the rest of your life is me. Isn't this what you've always wanted? Let's get married now and never be apart for the rest of our lives. Isn't that good? These words, however, made Killian feel increasingly agitated deep down. Is it really good to spend the rest of my life with Janet? But since childhood, the only thought in his heart has always been to grow old with Helen. They grew up together as childhood sweethearts. He was the big brother Helen trusted the most, and the knight who always stayed by Helen's side. Even after Helen went blind and he started seeing Janet behind her back, he never once considered cutting ties with Helen. Now, however, he has divorced Helen. And it was under the pretense of tricking Helen into signing the divorce papers. If Helen ever finds out the truth, how heartbroken would she be? Would she never forgive him? Killian didn't even dare to think about it anymore. We'll talk about this later. With those words, Killian turned and walked away. Janet screamed heart-wrenchingly behind him. Come back. Are you refusing to get the marriage certificate? Killian gave her a cruel answer with his back turned. After getting in the car, Killian drove straight toward the mental hospital. For some reason, he really wanted to see Helen now, afraid that if he didn't see her today, she might disappear from his world at any moment. The mental hospital was located in a remote area, and by the time he arrived, it was already dark. The uneasy premonition in his heart grew stronger. Killian found out Helen's room number from the nurse's station and, without even waiting for the elevator, strode upstairs. Although he knew Helen couldn't see him, he instinctively straightened his clothes before entering, but upon pushing the door open and seeing the scene inside, he froze in place. The ward was crammed with all kinds of clutter and medical equipment, barely leaving enough space for an old single bed, while the foul odor from the adjacent bathroom drifted in from time to time. Killian's fist clenched tightly. These people at the mental hospital, he paid them so much for treatment. And they put Helen in a storage room like this. He turned on the light angrily, wishing he could immediately pick Helen up from the bed and leave. But when the room lit up, he saw that the person lying on the bed wasn't Helen at all, but a doll. Looking down, he saw a woman in a patient gown lying face down on the floor. Helen, Killian gasped, helping the person up and holding them in his arms, only to see an unfamiliar face. The nurse was shaken awake, opening her eyes groggily, and then heard Killian's bone-chilling voice. Who are you? Why are you in Helen's hospital room? Where is Helen? The nurse came to her senses, immediately scrambled out of Killian's arms, and answered with a trembling voice, head bowed, Mr. Killian, MS. Helen, she took me hostage, I don't know where she went. Killian looked stern and immediately grabbed the nurse by the neck. What did you say? Helen is a patient. And she's blind, how could she possibly have the ability to take you hostage? The nurse was on the verge of tears. It really was her. She held a pen to my neck, knocked me out, and now I'm wearing her clothes. She must have put on my nurse's uniform and slipped away. Killian looked even more grim. Before the nurse could finish, he released her and strode toward the hospital's surveillance room. According to the surveillance footage, someone really did come out of that hospital room wearing a nurse's uniform that night, but she deliberately avoided the cameras and quickly moved into a blind spot, disappearing from view. Killian replayed the few minutes of surveillance footage over and over. That familiar figure, he could almost recognize it at a glance as Helen. It seems the nurse wasn't lying. But Helen is blind, isn't she? How could she manage to overpower the nurse, change into her clothes, and come and go so freely? A dreadful thought crossed Killian's mind. Could she have regained her sight? Recalling all the things he and Janet had done under Helen's nose these past few days, a wave of panic rose in his heart. He was afraid that Helen had long known about his affair with Janet, and that was why she had left. He didn't dare to dwell on it any further. And now, the most important thing is to find her as soon as possible. She was a woman, so thin and fragile. Killian didn't dare to imagine what kind of suffering she might endure if she fell into the hands of someone with ill intentions. He quickly contacted the police to file a report, but when they asked about his relationship with Helen, he hesitated. Just that day, he had finalized his divorce with Helen using the divorce agreement. Now, what exactly was their relationship? His Adam's apple bobbed twice. Killian said hoarsely, she is the sister I grew up with since childhood. After hearing this, the police shook their heads and told him that they could only file a case if Helen's relatives came forward. Killian was about to say something more when Janet, who had received the news, hurried over to his side. Honey, calm down, I've consulted the medical staff, and MS. Helen only left the hospital because of her unstable mental state. This kind of situation is quite common in psychiatric hospitals. The hospital has already sent people to look for her and guarantees they'll find her by tomorrow. With that, she climbed onto Killian's arm, forcefully pulling him away from the police station. Despite this, Killian's heart remained restless. Back at the villa, he locked himself in his study, constantly sifting through the memories he and Helen once shared, analyzing where Helen might have fled. He didn't sleep a wink all night, and the next morning, Janet suddenly rushed into the study in a panic. Oh no, honey, my brother has been arrested by the police. At the same time, the assistant's call came through, sounding very anxious. Mr. Killian, quickly check the news. Your indecent photos with MS. Janet have made the headlines on City H News, and the media is saying it was arranged by MS. Helen. Hearing Helen's name, Killian's heart tightened. He immediately opened his computer and clicked on the news page his assistant mentioned. Immediately after seeing the photo that appeared above, his entire body froze, and his mind went blank for a moment. This turned out to be a photo from that night a few days ago, when he had drugged Helen's milk and was caught by Janet being intimate in Helen's room. Moreover, at the very bottom of the news article, it was announced that they would release the video behind this photo on all city screens at 10 o'clock this noon. Killian's blood ran cold from head to toe. The assistant just said that all of this was arranged by Helen with the media, so, these photos and the unreleased videos were also recorded by Helen, right? It could only be her. There were only 3 people in the room that day, and the angle of the photos was taken from where Helen was lying on the bed. Helen knew everything all along. She saw it all but kept it hidden until now, waiting to publicly expose him and Janet in the news for everyone to see as her revenge. Janet also leaned in, covering her mouth in disbelief as her eyes widened at the photo. She immediately grabbed Killian's sleeve, her voice trembling. No, Killian, you have to get someone to take down the news. And the video, they can't make the video public, or we'll become the laughingstock of the entire City H. We already are, Killian murmured. What did you say? Killian scrolled further through the news and saw that a family photo of him, Janet, and their child had also been posted, accompanied by an eye-catching, explosive headline and content that criticized him, Killian, for maintaining a loving husband persona in public while being devoted to his blind wife, when in reality, he had already started a second family. Utterly ironic to the extreme, as if punishing himself. Killian read through all the mocking words and actually felt that they weren't wrong at all. He was the one who had betrayed Helen, and like a fool, he thought he had hidden it well, but in truth, he was only deceiving himself. Killian shook his head and whispered to Janet, look, we've become the laughingstock of all of City H now, but it's the truth. We betrayed Helen, what's the point in hiding it? Janet looked at him as if he were a madman. Killian, what's wrong with you? All of this is Helen's scheme. She wants to kill us. How could this bitch be so vicious? You grew up with her and took care of her when she was blind. You've already done more than enough for her. How dare she have the nerve to seek revenge on us? Could it be that a blind woman like her still expects someone to be devoted to her? We were kind enough to keep it from her, yet she refuses a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. She spoke with resentment, then suddenly thought of something. I've got an idea. Killian, just say you and Helen are already divorced. She's been slandering us and exposing our privacy. Let's sue her, make her go to jail, so she can never cause trouble again. Okay. Janet was clearly on the verge of going mad with rage, venting her hatred for Helen to the fullest and starting to fantasize about how to get revenge, crushing Helen into the ground. But Killian stiffened, grabbing her by the collar. How dare you? Janet, choked by the collar, struggled to breathe and weakly slapped Killian's arm. Killian, you're hurting me. Killian not only didn't let go, but moved even closer to Janet. His voice icy cold. Let me say it again. All of this is what we owe Helen. No matter how she seeks revenge, you must endure it. If you ever dare to entertain such harmful thoughts against Helen again, I won't hesitate to send you to prison first. Janet nodded hurriedly. Okay, please let go. I won't dare anymore. Killian finally released her, picked up his coat, turned around, and quickly left the villa. Since the assistant said the media published it on the newspaper under Helen's instructions, that means they must have met Helen. He was going to meet those people and ask them Helen where exactly she had gone. Killian went directly to the news building and asked to see their top executive. Upon hearing the news, the steward nearly dropped the teacup in his hand. Actually, he was still wary of Killian's influence in City H. But he couldn't resist the temptation of the $1 billion offered by Helen. Plus, this matter was indeed explosive news, so he went ahead and broke the story despite his fears. I didn't expect Killian to come demanding an explanation so quickly. The supervisor's face was wreathed in smiles as he trotted up to Killian, rubbing his hands together apologetically. We're really very sorry, Mr. Killian. We're just doing a job for pay. Everyone's just trying to make a living. Please don't hold it against us. His words were extremely humble, yet there was no intention to retract the press release. Originally thinking Killian was going to engage him in negotiations, he never expected Killian to merely cast him a cold glance before nodding slightly and saying, understood. I came here this time for something else. In the reception room, Killian fixed the steward with his hawk-like gaze and got straight to the point. I want to know, did you see Helen last night? Is she all right? Have her eyes regained sight? And where is she now? Though somewhat surprised by his question, the steward wiped the sweat from his temple and quickly replied, we only confirmed this order through a video call with Ms. Helen. During the call, Ms. Helen's eyes were indeed visible. Her vision showed no issues at all. However, she didn't reveal her location or where she was headed. Hearing that Helen's eyesight had truly been restored, Killian first felt joy and relief for her. But then his mood gradually grew heavier. It seems it's true, Helen knows everything. She could clearly see everything, yet still pretended to turn a blind eye to his sweetness with Janet. How painful that must have been. And then there was that child. Killian suddenly remembered that Helen's birthday happened to coincide with Ollie's first-year celebration, so he held both banquets on different floors of the same hotel. The difference was, everything he arranged for Ollie was genuine. While what he gave Helen was nothing but a lie, taking advantage of Helen's blindness, he hired some waitstaff and domestic caregivers to pose as guests, and even used a dusty sound system to pretend it was an orchestra hired for Helen. All of this, surely Helen saw through it all. How ironic. Thinking this way, Killian's heart began to ache uncontrollably, forcing him to clutch his chest and halt the conversation. The manager quickly stepped forward to ask if he needed to go to the hospital. But Killian waved him off. There's one more thing I need to ask you. Killian's voice was hoarse. When she video called you last night, did you see clearly where she was? I need to find her, it's very important. The manager tried to recall, then frowned and said, judging by the background, Ms. Helen must have been in an airport lounge when she spoke to me. Mr. Killian, she was utterly heartbroken by you, probably wanted to go abroad for a vacation to relax for a while. Having obtained the answer to his question, Killian rose without a word and strode away. His schedule for the day wasn't over yet. He recalled the previous 2 times when Helen had attacked Paul, and her claims about Janet and Paul kidnapping her. Back then, he had dismissed Helen as mentally unstable, thinking her prolonged blindness had caused psychological issues that led her to falsely accuse Janet and her brother. But the truth was, Helen was perfectly sane, even capable of devising such an elaborate plan for revenge. Then he had to reconsider these 2 matters anew. Had he misjudged someone all along, mistakenly trusted Janet, and even ended up helping her wrong Helen? This was truly important to him. And then there was Paul. The mere thought that this bastard might have actually harassed and tormented Helen right under his nose made Killian's fists clench tightly. He would get to the bottom of this. Since Helen could produce so much evidence to prove his infidelity and even leaked it to the media, then she must also have evidence of Paul abusing her. This morning, Janet suddenly mentioned that Paul had been arrested by the police. Such a coincidental timing must be Helen's doing. He needs to go to the police station right now to ask whether they received a report from Helen or obtained clues she provided, which led to such a swift arrest, before driving. Killian first made a call to his assistant. Forget about the news now, drop everything you're working on and find out which country Helen went to. I want the results in the shortest time possible. After hanging up, Killian pulled out a photo from the album. It was a picture of him and Helen. In the photo, the two of them were smiling so happily and freely. He couldn't believe Helen had really abandoned him like this. His gaze gradually grew resolute as he made a decision in his heart. That was, no matter how difficult it was, no matter what price he had to pay, he would definitely find Helen. He wanted to personally ask for her forgiveness and bring her back to his side. When Killian arrived at the police station, he found Janet already waiting there. However, she had lost her usual flamboyance. Instead, she wore a mask and a baseball cap, covering herself tightly, afraid that passers-by would recognize her as the female lead in today's news. Seeing Killian, Janet quickly trotted over and clung to his arm, her eyes filled with anticipation. "Killian, hurry and bail my brother out. They can't just arrest someone suddenly without evidence. My brother is truly innocent. Whether he's innocent or not will be clear once he faces the police." Killian coldly shook her off and strode inside. Upon hearing Janet and Killian's purpose, the police led them to a room and patiently explained. "We received a report that Paul planned a kidnapping on the 18th of this month. The evidence is solid, and his fingerprints were found at the scene, so he's currently detained. The opposing counsel will proceed with further charges." Killian asked urgently, "Can you tell me the victim's name?" His subconscious told him this was Helen's doing, because it was on the 18th that she returned home in a downpour, claiming she had been kidnapped. Janet also said, "I'm Paul's sister. And I also request to meet the person accusing my brother." Her fingers clenched tightly, betraying her inner nervousness. Yet she couldn't believe Helen was capable of such things. The police, however, stated that the victim wished to remain anonymous and advised them to direct any communication through the victim's legal representative. Janet began protesting angrily again. "This person won't even show their face. How can you trust their word enough to arrest my brother? This isn't fair." Regarding this, the police said no more, only playing a recording. "Listen for yourselves." Immediately after, the complete recording of Janet and Paul kidnapping Helen and subjecting her to abuse began playing in the small room. "Bro, we're just teaching her a lesson today. If we hurt her and Killian finds out, it won't be good." "Janet, Paul, you actually kidnapped me. You recognized our voices so quickly. But the show I prepared hasn't even started yet," a scream echoed. Mingled with Paul's mocking laughter, Janet's face gradually paled. "Helen, that bitch, did she really secretly keep the recording?" She hurriedly turned off the recording, shouting in defense, "These are all fake, synthesized with AI technology. My brother and I have an alibi. Our car was stuck on the highway that day." As she spoke, her icy hand grabbed Killian, her voice trembling slightly. "Killian, darling, quickly tell them I'm speaking the truth. You can vouch for me, right? Get out of my sight." Killian had reached his limit of endurance. No wonder he had felt something was off about Janet's miscarriage prevention story that day. It was all just a carefully laid trap of hers. She fabricated an alibi, but in reality, she had tied up Helen and tortured her. The screams of Helen from the recording moments ago still echoed relentlessly in his mind, sending waves of dull pain through his heart. This was the girl he had protected since childhood. How dare they torment her like this? Killian could bear it no longer and slapped Janet hard across the face, leaving her cheek instantly red and swollen. Seeing this, the two police officers immediately shouted to stop them. Then, Killian reached out his hand, trembling as he pointed at Janet and said, "She is the accomplice of Paul in the recording just now. Besides, I also want to accuse Paul of attempting to assault Helen 3 years ago. He hasn't been jailed for that yet, and I want him to pay for both the old and new debts." Janet widened her eyes in disbelief. "Killian, are you crazy? Do you even know what you're doing?" But Killian just stared at her coldly, his eyes filled with nothing but pure disgust. At this moment, the police officer spoke calmly. "Mr. Killian, we will handle your request according to the law. However, apart from that, there's another matter we need to discuss with you and Ms. Janet." The officer pulled up surveillance footage from the computer showing how they had conspired at the hospital that day and then arbitrarily sent Helen into the operating room to harvest her skin, which was then grafted onto Paul. Killian's brows gradually furrowed. his knuckles turning white from the force of his clenched fists. He hadn't expected that Helen would also know about this matter. She must be utterly disappointed in him, must hate him to the core. Yet all of this had happened with his silent consent. In an instant, Killian was overwhelmed by a wave of immense regret. Janet's shrill voice shattered his thoughts as she pointed at the surveillance footage and screamed, "It's not our fault. Helen attacked my brother first. This is what she deserves. We did nothing wrong." Besides, at the time, Helen was still Killian's wife. A husband making the decision to cut a piece of skin for his wife, that's just a family matter. There's no need to drag it all the way here. Enough, Killian snapped harshly. He turned to look at the police, his attitude extremely cooperative. "I admit, I did this, and I realize my mistake. If the victim has any demands or wants compensation, she can come out and talk to me personally." The victim doesn't want compensation. She only demands that you receive the legal punishment you deserve. She really won't even see me once. Killian lowered his eyelashes, his face showing undisguised disappointment. After a brief silence, his Adam's apple bobbed twice before he spoke. "All right, then let's comply with the victim's request. Lock me up. Consider it," giving her some closure. But Janet wasn't as cooperative as Killian. Despite overwhelming evidence and witness testimonies, she still refused to admit guilt. Shouting defiantly until the police resorted to forceful measures to detain her temporarily. A week later, Killian was urgently bailed out by his assistant. He initially thought he had found Helen's trail, which was why he cooperated fully throughout the entire process. But as he stepped out of the police station, he learned that his assistant had bailed him out for an entirely different reason. After his affair with Janet was exposed to the media, it caused a massive uproar. Many people dug up details about his extravagant wedding with Helen, along with all the promises he had publicly made to Helen at the time. The depth of everyone's past admiration now matches the intensity of their current disgust for Killian's betrayal. Not to mention, when that video of him with Janet was released a week ago, everyone learned he'd actually been intimate with Janet in Helen's own bedroom. Then there was forcing Helen to donate skin grafts for Paul for Janet's sake, and coercively committing Helen to a psychiatric hospital. All these incidents came to light one after another. Combined with his current detained status, these revelations became the stone that stirred 1,000 waves, provoking universal contempt and outrage. In just 1 week, the company's stock price plummeted, partners withdrew their investments one after another, employees were panicked and in complete chaos, and shareholders even collectively pressured to expel Killian from the board. Under this immense pressure, Killian had no choice but to quickly follow his assistant to attend a company meeting, temporarily stabilizing the situation and calming the unrest. By the time he finished the meeting and dealt with a series of documents before returning to his villa, it was already dawn the next day. Killian's car hadn't even entered the villa grounds when he saw a crowd gathered outside his villa, throwing rotten eggs and spoiled vegetables. They even hung banners calling him heartless, shameless, and devoid of conscience. The driver asked, "Mr. Killian, should we call the police?" Killian merely shook his head, enduring it all with a self-destructive mindset. This was Helen's revenge, and now the only faint connection remaining between him and Helen. Killian could only return to the villa through the back door, with his assistant following closely behind. "Did you bring the person I asked for, after coming out yesterday?" He had also instructed his assistant to bail out Janet. It wasn't that he didn't want her to face legal punishment, but in his view, compared to everything Helen had suffered, letting her be locked up for just a few years was far too lenient. Since Janet had used so many tactics against Helen, he would also let Janet see what he was capable of. The assistant nodded. "Mr. Killian, she's already locked in the basement." In the basement, Janet lay bound hand and foot, gagged, covered in wounds, and barely alive in the corner. When she saw Killian enter, she immediately struggled violently, letting out muffled sobs as large tears streamed down her face. The assistant removed the cloth from her mouth, and she immediately burst into hoarse, tearful cries. "Killian, it wasn't you, right? I know you would never do this to me. Who was it that kidnapped me and did all this? You have to stand up for me." Killian looked down at the purple bruises on her body and smiled. "Those beggars from last night, I sent them to entertain you." Janet widened her eyes in disbelief before screaming hysterically, "You're insane. Do you have any idea what they did to me?" "Of course I do. Exactly what your brother tried but failed to do to Helen 3 years ago." As he spoke, Killian lit a cigarette, his eyes growing darker amidst the smoke. "I already know 3 years ago, you deliberately lured me to stay, giving Paul the chance to target Helen, but now I'm telling you. Janet, whether Helen was violated by your brother or not, she'll always be the best in my eyes. Even if you seized the opportunity and enjoyed these 3 years of glory, I can still drag you down anytime and make you atone for Helen." Janet's body trembled violently with rage. Her voice shattered beyond recognition. No, I won't admit it, you have no proof. Killian, how dare you treat me like this? The next second, Killian plunged a sharp knife into Janet's thigh, making her scream in pain as her palms dug into the ground so hard that 2 fingernails snapped off. This cut is the price for that day when you slandered Helen, pushed her down, injured her head, and forced her to get skin grafts. The nanny from that day has confessed it was your brother who sneaked into Helen's room trying to assault her, and Helen only fought back in self-defense. And one more thing, Killian grabbed Janet by the hair again, dragging her to a massive vat filled to the brim with high-concentration chili water. Just being near it, Janet was already choking, her eyes streaming with tears, but the next second, Killian forced her entire head under the liquid. Janet thrashed violently, feeling as if her entire face and scalp were burning with an intense, searing pain. For the first time, she experienced what it meant to suffer something more terrifying than death. Killian held her head firmly in place, speaking leisurely, "Isn't this the same trick you used on Helen? Now I'm returning it to you tenfold, you'd better last a little longer." Janet struggled with diminishing strength until, just before her last breath, Killian yanked her up and flung her violently to the ground. By then, Janet was too weak to even lift a finger, her voice was as faint as a mosquito's hum, yet Killian heard it. "Killian, you can't do this to me, at least, I'm still Ollie's mother." Hearing this, Killian smiled. He took a stack of documents from his assistant and threw them piece by piece at Janet. These were all the evidence the assistant had gathered of Janet's crimes against Helen. Beyond what Killian had just mentioned, the documents clearly stated that the fire at Helen's villa had been set by Janet. It turned out Janet had long planned to eliminate Helen and take her place. That's why after failing, she was so desperate to fabricate excuses to send Helen to a mental hospital, even going out of her way to bribe the doctors there to give her special care. Her goal was to drive Helen completely insane. Even if she wasn't ill to begin with, her venomous schemes far exceeded Killian's wildest imagination. Faced with such irrefutable evidence, Janet finally panicked, just as she was about to plead for mercy. Killian's icy voice rang out above her head, "After all this, do you really think I'd still let you see Ollie? What do you mean?" Janet desperately crawled to Killian's feet, clutching his pant leg as she pleaded frantically, "I'm Ollie's mother. I carried him for 10 months and gave birth to him. He's just turned 1 and hasn't even been weaned yet. How dare you keep me from seeing him? Killian, explain yourself." Killian crouched down, gripping her chin forcefully as he spoke word by word. "Because you're a criminal, staying would only corrupt the children." And, as he spoke, the smile on his lips deepened, yet it made Janet feel utterly sinister and sent shivers down her spine. "And now that you're sick, you should be locked up in a mental hospital. How could a lunatic possibly take care of a child properly?" Janet suddenly widened her eyes as realization dawned. Killian had orchestrated everything from the moment he captured her, all to repay her tenfold, 100-fold, for the harm she had once inflicted upon Helen. Once, she slandered Helen as mentally ill, deceiving Killian into locking Helen away in a psychiatric hospital, so Killian would do the same to her. "But I've heard those people in the mental hospital use extremely brutal methods. If you disobey orders, they'll even use electric shocks. If she gets locked up there, even if she's not ill, they'll torture her into becoming mentally ill. She can't go." At this thought, Janet immediately changed her attitude. She softened and began pleading desperately with Killian. "Killian, husband, I beg you not to treat me like this. I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong." As she spoke, she even started banging her head forcefully against the floor, still saying, "Haven't you done enough to me already as an apology to Helen? Just look at the 3 years I've spent with you. Look at the son I've born for you. Won't you spare me this once? I promise you, I'll behave properly and keep my head down from now on. I won't even pressure you to marry me anymore. Just give me a chance. Watch how I behave. I swear I'll never disappoint you again. Please don't send me to the mental hospital. Killian, I love you. Ollie and I are your real family. Won't you even look at me?" Killian had already stood up. No matter how desperately she pleaded, he didn't spare her another glance. As he strode toward the door, he said to his assistant, "This woman has already gone somewhat mad. Arrange today to have her committed to a mental institution, where she'll spend the rest of her days. Also, keep searching for Helen. This remains our top priority, taking precedence over all other tasks, Mr. Killian." Killian gazed at the sunlight gradually breaking through the dissipating clouds outside the window and murmured pensively, "Helen, where on earth are you?" Meanwhile, in Australia, before disembarking the plane, I had already snapped the phone card I used in City H, planning to find a public phone after leaving the airport to contact my brother. But to my surprise, I spotted my brother and parents waiting for me in the crowd at the exit from afar, holding up an exaggerated sign that read, "Welcome home, Helen." My brother jogged up to me, took my suitcase, and ushered me toward our parents. Not just the sign, they had even prepared a huge bouquet of flowers for me, all brimming with ceremonial flair. I smiled and greeted them. Dad, Mom, brother, I've made you worry during this time. My mother looked me up and down carefully, then her eyes welled up with tears. Helen, why have you lost so much weight? You don't look well at all. Have you been wronged? Having just escaped from the mental hospital, I changed clothes in a hurry and boarded the plane, only catching some sleep during the flight without even eating. I looked exhausted and haggard, but I didn't want them to worry, so I just casually said, "Not at all, I'm perfectly fine. Look, my eyes are completely fine now. Mom, that jade jewelry set you're wearing today is absolutely beautiful." I spun around in front of them, deliberately forcing a smile. They tacitly stopped pressing further. After my brother confirmed once more that my eyes were truly fine, he happily said, "Good that you're okay. Good that you're okay. Let's go home." To celebrate little sister's return, I'm going to show off my cooking skills today. Returning to their house in Australia, I discovered they had thoughtfully renovated it according to the habits of the blind. My brother said that because our parents had long wanted me to come, and it would be easier for them to take me to medical appointments. They had made these preparations in advance, though they never imagined my eyes would miraculously recover. At that moment, I finally realized that home is the warmest harbor, and they are the ones who will always stand by my side, supporting me unconditionally. They gave me unconditional support even if I offered no reason. If I asked for 100 million, they would transfer it to me without hesitation. Now seeing me mentally exhausted, they don't press me about what exactly happened back home, offering me unconditional acceptance and bottomless patience. After a heartwarming dinner, I returned to the room my parents had prepared for me, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that let me bask in sunlight during the day, but I simply took a quick shower before knocking on my brother's study door. "What's wrong, Helen? It's so late, aren't you going to rest?" My brother stood up, took my hand, and sat me down on the sofa in the study, patiently waiting for my response. After thinking for a moment, I spoke directly. "Brother, actually, the reason I asked you for that 100 million back then was to get revenge on Killian. He cheated on me and secretly had a child with another woman." My brother had probably guessed part of the story already, but hearing these words directly from me, especially learning that Killian had fathered a love child, still made him furious. He slammed his palm heavily on the desk. "That bastard." "Brother, calm down first," I continued. "I've already gathered evidence to expose his actions domestically. That 100 million was the fee paid to the media, but this isn't over yet. He not only betrayed me but also made me waste 100 million on him for nothing. So, targeting his company is my next move." I glanced at my watch. The first wave of news should be breaking back home by now. When the media outlets successively release the evidence I provided, the Lucian family will definitely face massive public pressure. What I need to do is take advantage of their vulnerability, poach their business partners, and gradually turn the Lucian family into an empty shell company. "Brother, our family's business hasn't completely relocated to Australia. I remember we still have a subsidiary in City H. Could you temporarily transfer the subsidiary's shares to my name? I want to personally strike against the Lucian family." But I never expected that after hearing all this, the first thing my brother would say was, "Helen, actually back when you chose to stay in City H, Mom and Dad had already transferred all the shares of that subsidiary to your name. You've had the final say in the company all along." Before I could even process my shock, my brother continued, "Had I known you needed that 100 million to get revenge on Killian, I would have rushed to City H immediately to be your assistant. Little sister, you've fought this battle alone long enough. Now that you're home, just rest. Whether it's the parent company or the subsidiaries, they are all businesses of our Morton family, and yours as well. So, from now on, I will act in your name to deal with the Lucian family, helping you reclaim all the grievances you've suffered over the years from Killian." I was moved beyond words, but after all, this was my own matter, and my brother already had enough on his plate. "Brother, but, say no more." My brother raised his hand to stop me, directly leading me back to my room. Before closing the door, he gave me a reassuring look and added in a low voice, "Listen to me, get a good night's sleep, leave everything else to me. If I find out you're not resting properly, I'll tell our parents about how you worried them back home, and then you can look forward to their endless nagging." I could only smile helplessly and comply, but the next day, my parents still found out some things. During breakfast, my father couldn't hold back anymore. "Helen, we've seen the domestic news." Before I could even swallow half a bite of pancake, my heart sank. City HS news had reached Australia so quickly. Then, my mother spoke with a choked voice, "Because you've always stayed in City H. We developed the habit of keeping up with City H news at all times. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known that Killian, that bastard, actually did so many wrong things to you. He clearly grew up with you since childhood, and we've seen how good he's been to you all these years. But who would have thought he'd still betray you? Helen, have you divorced him? Stay by your parents' side from now on, never leave our sight again. I immediately pulled out a tissue to wipe my mother's tears, softly assuring her that I had already divorced him and telling her not to worry, but my mother still insisted on taking me to the hospital for a checkup. Because they also knew about my being sent to a mental institution and forced skin grafting, worrying that my body hadn't fully recovered. Fortunately, my brother stepped in to help me out. Mom, Dad, don't worry about this. After dinner, I'll take little sis to the hospital for a checkup. Do you remember the doctor I mentioned before? After little sis came back yesterday, I made an appointment with the doctor to have her eyes re-examined. And we'll also give her a full body checkup while we're at it. You can rest assured, actually, even if my brother hadn't offered to take me for an eye re-examination, I should have found time for a thorough checkup. After all, this sudden recovery of my sight was really unexpected. And more than once I've been afraid it might just be temporary, that one day I'd wake up and be plunged back into endless darkness. So naturally I had no objections. After dinner, I got into my brother's car and he took me to Australia's most authoritative eye hospital. He seemed to have come here many times for me, effortlessly guiding me straight to the doctor's office. Moreover, why does this person look so familiar? After my brother briefly explained my condition to the doctor, he proactively left and closed the door behind us, providing a quiet environment for the examination. Doctor lowered his head to pick up some examination tools. My gaze remained fixed on him the entire time, as I felt certain I'd seen him somewhere before. Suddenly struck by a thought, I blurted out, "Richard." Perhaps having already reviewed my medical records, Richard showed no particular reaction when he saw me arrive, but upon hearing me call his name, his entire body stiffened momentarily. A surge of intense emotion swirled in his eyes as he stammered, "Why you remember me?" Of course I remember Richard. During my freshman year, he was a senior, top of his class academically, from a wealthy family, and exceptionally handsome. He was the dream guy for countless girls across campus. Yet his personality was aloof, hardly interacting with girls at all. Once when my roommates and I were playing at a bar, the dare was that whoever lost had to go ask Richard for his WeChat. That time, I was the one who lost, but since I already had Killian, I punished myself with 3 drinks instead of completing the dare. But no one expected that just 1 week after that day, Richard's family suddenly went bankrupt. Richard was absent from school for a whole week. When he returned, the former academic prodigy had fallen from grace, becoming a poor student burdened with massive debts, and everyone kept their distance from him. Even loan sharks came chasing after him at school. One noon, I saw him being cornered by a group near the school lake. When they couldn't get money, they pinned him to the ground. Beating and cursing him, I immediately called the police and rushed to get security, who rescued him. I remember Richard's expression clearly at that time. It could be described as utterly lifeless. When the police arrived and asked if he wanted to give a statement, he just waved his hand dismissively, saying it wasn't necessary. He added that he planned to withdraw from school that very day, so those people wouldn't come looking for him on campus again. Hearing this, I couldn't help but step forward and say to him, "No, I'll go with you to give a statement. With grades that good, his future should have been bright. He shouldn't let those people ruin it like this." I've forgotten how I managed to persuade him that day, but in the end he went with me to the police station to give his statement. Those people were afraid of the police and never came to school looking for him again. Later, I heard he got into a prestigious university abroad, went on to get his master's degree and then his PhD. I thought I'd never see him again, never imagined he'd end up being my doctor now. "If I hadn't recognized you, were you just going to keep pretending not to know me?" I asked him with a smile. "By the way, how's your family doing now? Have you paid off all your debts?" Richard gave a slight nod. "My dad came back to Australia to start a new business. The company is doing really well now, just like you said back then, as long as you're alive. There's no adversity you can't overcome." I can't even remember the exact words I said so many years ago. I didn't expect him to still recall them. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Richard had me lie down on the examination table and carefully checked my eyes. When the examination was over, he removed his gloves, typed something on the computer, and then said to me, "It was a blood clot in your brain pressing against the optic nerve that caused your blindness initially. Now that the clot has dissolved, your vision has returned. However, you still shouldn't overstrain your eyes or exhaust yourself. I'll prescribe some medication for you to take regularly, and come back for follow-up checkups every 3 days." I took the prescription he handed me, bid him farewell, and turned to leave only to be called back. "Helen, let's exchange contact information. It'll make it easier to discuss your condition anytime." Turning back, I noticed he looked slightly flustered, the tips of his ears tinged with red. I lowered my head with a smile and exchanged phone numbers with him. As I left, I waved my phone at him and said, even if it's not about discussing my condition, we can still keep in touch often. Old classmate. In the days that followed, all I had to do was bask in the doting affection of my parents and brother at home, then go to the hospital for regular checkups on time. Everything else was taken care of. My brother said he had already poached Lucian family's large group of business partners, but he wasn't planning to stop there. He hoped to acquire the Lucian family, kicking Killian out of the Lucian household and turning his most prized career into mere bubbles. Actually, hearing these things doesn't affect me much anymore. Perhaps it's because having family and friends by my side has left me utterly content, making even love and hatred fade into insignificance. Even my desire for revenge against Killian no longer seems important. Though my brother still hasn't given up on the idea, I can't be bothered to care anymore. That day, after Richard finished examining me, it happened to be lunchtime. A newly opened restaurant nearby was quite popular, so we went there together to eat. Through my interactions with Richard, I've realized he isn't naturally taciturn, he just doesn't know how to interact with women. Fortunately, frequent meetings and his deliberate efforts to find topics have bridged this gap. Now we were like old friends who'd known each other for years, chatting and laughing while queuing outside the restaurant, blending seamlessly into the Australian streets, as ordinary and cheerful as every diner at their tables. Just as we were about to reach the front of the line, a car suddenly pulled up and parked straight ahead not far from us. Horns blared around us, but the driver paid no mind, quickly stepping out of the vehicle and walking straight toward me. When I saw who it was, I froze slightly. Killian. How did he find me, after 2 months apart? Killian looked much more haggard than he had back in City H. His eyes were bloodshot, exhaustion etched between his brows. Clearly, the gift I left him before departing, along with my brother's recent pressure, had truly put him in a difficult position. He strode quickly toward me, his eyes suddenly brightening, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. Darling, I've finally found you. As he spoke, he reached out to take my hand, but I quickly dodged him. Killian, watch your words. From the moment you made me sign that divorce agreement, I ceased to be your wife. Killian gasped. So, you saw the agreement after all? I sneered. Yes, not just the agreement. I've known everything that happened after my birthday, seen it all with my own eyes. Shall I spell it out to refresh your memory? Killian's face was a little pale, and an expression of regret and self-reproach quickly appeared on his face. He whispered, I'm sorry, Helen, I didn't know you could see at the time, so I ridiculously thought everything was under control and caused you so much harm. It's all my fault, so no matter how you retaliated against me later, I accepted it. Because I owed you everything. I admit, I couldn't resist temptation when you lost your sight, easily believing Janet and getting involved with her. But after you exposed those evidences, I saw her true colors. I only felt novelty with her, never love. I've already repaid every bit of harm she inflicted on you, and even had her committed to a mental institution. I swear I'll never see her again in this lifetime, nor have any contact with her. Yes, and Paul too. I hired Lucian family's best lawyers to sue him, settling both the old accounts from 3 years ago and this year's kidnapping case. He'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. Helen, I've finally seen my own heart clearly now. I'm certain the only person I've ever truly loved in this lifetime is you. Please, give me one more chance. Let's go home. Let's never be apart again. Okay. By the end, his voice cracked with emotion as he reached out to pull me towards him. Richard quickly pulled me behind him and coldly warned, Helen has already made it very clear to you, you're divorced. Please stop harassing her. Killian's gaze kept shifting between me and Richard. Helen, who is he? What's your relationship? After a moment's thought, I directly grasped Richard's hand. He's my boyfriend, Killian. Give it up. I could feel Richard's body stiffen for a moment when I finished speaking, but he quickly recovered and firmly grasped my hand. Interlacing our fingers, Killian widened his eyes in disbelief. This can't be true. Helen, you couldn't have fallen for someone else, right? Heh, I sneered, casting a sharp glance his way. What? You could cheat on me with Janet during our marriage, but I can't fall in love with someone else after divorce. Never heard of such logic in this world. It was my mistake in the past, blindly falling for you and giving you repeated chances to deceive and hurt me. But that ends now, Killian. You don't need to explain anything about you and Janet or Paul anymore. None of it matters to me because, frankly, you don't matter to me at all. Killian, I said, meeting his gaze word by word, I don't love you anymore, understand? With that, I took Richard's hand and turned to leave. Killian tried to follow, but Richard shoved him back and abruptly grabbed him by the collar. Helen made herself perfectly clear. Are you deaf? I never noticed before that Richard, usually so gentle and patient, could be so sharp-tongued with outsiders. Killian grabbed Richard's wrist, glaring at him with such resentment it seemed they might come to blows any second. Just then, Australian patrol officers rushed over and restrained them. I explained to the police in fluent English that Killian was a stranger who'd suddenly appeared to harass me, and that's why Richard had confronted him. Upon hearing this, they immediately and forcefully grabbed Killian and dragged him away. Killian, unable to break free from being dragged, still struggled to shout behind me, "Helen, I won't give up. In my heart, you'll always be my wife. You can't be with someone else." I shook my head and quickly left the place with Richard. Because of this sudden turn of events, we lost our appetite for checking in at the trendy restaurant and ended up hastily having lunch at a convenience store instead. Since I had nothing to do in the afternoon, I decided to accompany Richard back to the hospital, helping him organize his office as a way to thank him for his earlier assistance. But in the hallway leading to his office, a female patient suddenly rushed out, holding a bouquet of flowers and trying to shove it into Richard's arms. I had heard before that due to Richard's striking looks and exceptional medical skills, female patients were constantly pursuing him. And the one before us was the most obsessive Lisa, a patient who had been harassing Richard for nearly half a year. Richard coldly pushed the flowers back. "Sorry, Lisa, I'm not interested in you." I was secretly shocked inside. His words were so icy. Wouldn't they hurt Lisa's feelings? But the next second, Lisa actually pointed at him and started yelling, saying he had no taste, threatening to report him as an unqualified doctor, and vowing to keep harassing him. Restrained by her being a woman, Richard forced himself not to react, but I couldn't hold back. I shoved Lisa hard, then hooked my arm through Richard's to declare ownership. "Didn't you hear what Dr. just said? He doesn't like you. Stop harassing him. Besides, Dr. already has a girlfriend. We're very happy together. Do you really want to be the homewrecker everyone despises?" Lisa stared at Richard in disbelief, pointing at me as she demanded, "Is what she said true?" Richard pulled me directly into his embrace. "Yes, I already have a girlfriend. Please respect yourself." Lisa, two huge tears rolled down her cheeks. Then, she threw the bouquet to the ground, covered her eyes, and ran out. Only then did I extricate myself from Richard's arms and said to him somewhat sheepishly, "Sorry about that. I took the liberty of pretending to be your girlfriend without asking first. I hope it won't affect your chances of finding a real girlfriend in the future." Richard stared straight at me and continued, "But I thought it was really good just now." I was momentarily stunned. "What did you say?" Richard kept staring at me intently, as if wrestling with some intense inner turmoil. He took a deep breath and said directly, "Helen, the truth is I've liked you since that moment you helped me back in university. I just never dared to get closer to you, so whether it's me pretending to be your girlfriend or me pretending to be your boyfriend, I'd be equally happy, because only during those brief moments can I openly hold your hand and call you mine." My eyes widened in disbelief. Truth be told, it's not that I never considered Richard might have some feelings for me, but I always dismissed the thought so easily, assuming it was just my imagination, not just because of his gentlemanly manners and sense of boundaries, but also because he knows everything that's happened to me, my divorce, my blindness, and the child I lost. Though I may appear carefree now, my heart has long been desolate. Could someone like me ever truly be loved? As if seeing through my thoughts, Richard went straight to the point. "Helen, I genuinely like you and want to stay by your side, sharing both your joys and sorrows. Could you give me a chance to pursue you?" My heart was beating rapidly at an abnormal frequency. I never expected that in this moment, I would actually feel joy in my heart. Perhaps I had already developed feelings for Richard during our frequent interactions, but I just didn't dare admit it to myself, so I smiled and said to him with laughter, "If you want to pursue me, just do it, no need to announce it." Richard also curved his lips into a smile and boldly took my hand. "All right then, I'll use actions to show you how much I like you." In the following days, Richard would prepare gifts for me every day. Sometimes it was a bouquet of flowers, sometimes an expensive gemstone necklace, and other times a novel and interesting little toy. No matter how busy he was, he would always make time to ask me out, even if there was nothing special to do. Just being with me was enough to satisfy him. At the same time, I noticed Killian hadn't given up yet. He kept appearing within my vicinity, but before he could come out to meet me, my brother's people would spot him and drive him away. That day, while Richard and I were buying ice cream by the street, Killian suddenly appeared before us. Afraid he'd be chased away the next second, he hurriedly tried to show his sincerity. "Helen, I beg you to give me another chance. I'll truly love you well." I turned to leave, but the next second, he actually knelt right in front of me, pleading pitifully, "What must I do for you to believe me? I truly can't live without you, and I've genuinely realized my mistake. Helen, please don't leave me." I looked at him quietly and said, "Can a simple apology erase all the pain I've endured before? And what about your child with Janet? Can you just stuff the child back in?" Killian turned pale inch by inch, unable to utter a single word. Suddenly, a red car came barreling toward us. I saw that the person behind the wheel was Lisa. "Helen, look out!" In the blink of an eye, Killian charged forward, shoving me and Richard out of the way. The car slammed into him, sending him flying through the air in a parabolic arc before he crashed heavily to the ground. 3 months later, after that car accident, Killian was sent to the hospital and never bothered me again. Meanwhile, Lisa was arrested for attempted murder, facing a long prison sentence. During our 3 months together, I saw Richard's sincerity and accepted his confession. As the sun set, Richard and I held hands, strolling down the maple leaf-strewn street like the most ordinary couple in the world. But as we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following us. At a street corner, I suddenly turned around. Then, I saw Killian, who hadn't had time to hide. He sat in a wheelchair, his legs forever unable to stand again after that car accident. This time, instead of pestering me endlessly, he gave a bitter smile and handed me a document. "Helen, these are the acquisition documents for the Lucian family. Starting today, the Lucian family is yours. You once told me not to see you again, but I couldn't help myself and secretly followed you one more time. It won't happen again. Helen, goodbye." Killian looked at me one last time with reluctant longing, then maneuvered his wheelchair away. Under the dusky yellow sunset, his retreating figure looked so utterly alone.